Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Dr. Jinong and I'm your host. I'm a cathartic release therapist, professionally trained as an osteopath, psychosomatic therapist, Western acupuncturist, and herbalist. I'm fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain, whether it be physical or emotional, and live the life they truly desire, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body, as well as behavioural dysfunctions and mental imbalances that present. I do this using a unique blend of Eastern and Western philosophies and a good dose of intuition. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Today I'm joined by Anthony and Nalasa, who are the carriers of the Pure Heart True Love frequency. They're on a mission to share the principles and practice of evolutionary partnership. I will leave it to them to explain more. Welcome to the podcast, Nalasa and Anthony. This is the first time I've had two people to talk to, so I guess we're going to get double the information from both of you. Can you start with introducing yourself, who you are, what you do? We'll go from there and see what comes out. We'll go with you first, Nalasa.
There's so many different ways I can answer that. Me personally, I work with design of space and energetics, and really viewing how in your work you view kind of any stuck energy being in the body, and I transfer that out into even being in your environment and your space. And so I work with design and small movements even that people can take, as well as grounding energies, relabeling pieces of furniture or spaces of your environment to really get you to be your fullest expression of yourself at your essence.
Oh, I love that. I do think space and your external environment is so important as to how you operate. And Anthony?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I coach visionary leaders to create the impossible. So I work with people who are committed on a mission to create upgrades for civilization level change. So whether that's bringing forward technologies to use frequency as medicine and performance, or new conscious media companies and TV companies, and so assist them to dream bigger than they've ever dreamt before, and then take smaller and clearer, more focused steps possible in that direction to accomplish the very specific results that they want to deliver for themselves in the world. And then together we are Love's Next Level. And so the idea of that is evolutionary partnership and couples coming together in order to be all that they can be and to kind of create a living legacy through the ripples of impact they create in the world together, but also through the kind of deep, exquisite connection and love that they share, and using that as a tool for innovation, creativity, impact, and spreading more joy and love in the world.
Cool. I reckon that's probably a good pathway for us to go down, because that's your joint project together. And I know that a lot of people out there do wonder, can they have the relationship that they really desire? And it just goes much deeper on an energetic level as well. So how is it that you guys came together and wanted to create something to help people have these relationships, evolutionary relationships?
I'll speak to that. So Nalasa was in California, and she recently broke up with the person she thought she was going to marry. And I'll let her speak more about that in a moment. And I was in Edinburgh. I have a daughter there. And basically, in honesty, I just created a big mess with, my former partner and the woman that I thought I was going to marry many years ago. And then after doing a lot of like deep inner work and meeting shame and anger and fear and these, ideas of not believing that I was worthy of having the kind of relationship that I wanted, and then also in kind of listening to people who said, well, try and make it work with this person, and like I knew I had a deep inner knowing that I needed to go to California in order to meet the person that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And then it turned out I was with a friend and a client in Northern California, and this event popped up on Facebook that I almost talked myself out of going to. And then when I arrived at this some kind of community on the land-based permaculture community, I was introduced to this woman who offered me a piece of bread and some butter or some cheese, and that was Nalasa, yeah. and then it turned out. So I was like the week after I was heading back to the UK. And Nalasa was really busy, so we thought we were going to meet for lunch. We thought we had like one lunch date, and that was going to be it. And then it turned out that Nalasa's schedule opened up. And so our lunch date turned into like 3 days of connecting really beautifully before I went back to Edinburgh. And then I just kept coming back. And then I came back just before lockdown happened. And so when lockdown happened, I came to California, and Nalasa was there. We spent a couple of days hanging out, and she went and moved to Boston. And I was like, okay, and she was just this very blasé, all right, I'll see you next week. And next week turned into like 2.5 months. And I was with the same client that I was at when I first met Nalasa. I went to go and do like a 2-day intensive with him that turned into me staying with him for 2.5 months. And some friends showed up there and were like, oh, would you like to go and see Nalasa? I was like, yeah, okay, we'll drive you. So just as the kind of American lockdown was ending, I got kind of chauffeured from Los Angeles all the way to Boston on a kind of epic road trip. And then from there, life happened.
Yeah, right. Okay, I've got to get more details in a minute. Tell us your story, Nalasa.
So we met at a friend's event that was a New Year's, bringing in 2020 from essentially a 2030 like visioning weekend workshop that I could only go to a small amount of it. And I will talk about this, but when I met Anthony, I recently had broken up with my ex-fiance, and that brought up a ton of emotional things. That is what we'll talk about soon. So I had just come out of, I think, like 2 months of like deep processing of inner wounds and everything. And at the weekend that I met him, there was just this instant chemistry or just connection. And the weekend too, and what we were doing for visioning, it was just very open, really just what are you wanting to create in your life type feel. And it was interesting in thinking about visioning where I'm wanting to go, and having this person that we just kind of really naturally got together. His whole thing of my weekend opening up, I ended up trying to make it work with my ex one more time. And then I was like, I'm actually free on Sunday if you want to get together. And it was great. He texted me the perfect thing, which was, give me your address. I'll meet you pick you up at 10 and we'll go on an adventure, which was wonderful. It was just like, get something else going here, different mindset, and just get out in the world and relax and appreciate someone with like a deep level of consciousness that I've been bonding with from this visioning workshop anyway. And as far as like my whole life, I've always had this idea of being in like working partnership with someone. The idea of doing something, creating a love that's so big that like ripples outwards, and really being able to work together to show and create impact in the world from this like level of depth and connection is something that I think, I don't know if other people dream about it as a teenager, but it feels like it's always been kind of like my fairy tale as well, from knowing that a love this big can exist and like really claiming that.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people think it's a bit of a fairy tale, and I do get surprised by how many people are in relationships that, you know, they can't actually talk about a lot of things, or they feel like they can't talk about a lot of things with people, and they do stay in relationships longer and, you know, staying comfortable out of fear that they won't find what it is they actually truly desire. So maybe what we do is we'll go back to Anthony and just find out what is your reflections on your previous relationship, what went through your mind, and what decisions did you need to make?
So, reflections on the previous relationship. So, I mean, I think I was always looking for what Nalasa's just spoken to, right? I was looking for this, you know, one true love. I was involved in the leadership team, some like global ceremonies in Peru, Bolivia, and Bali. And these were all around like bringing this energy of pure heart love and connecting with one's like one true love, and bringing these energies like onto the planet of that opening to the possibility that a kind of love and relationship and a kind of way of being was available to us that has never been available before, or at least, you know, hasn't been available in humanity's consciousness for a very long time. And I think the issue for me that I was going around and like projecting that relationship and that ideal onto people who just simply weren't really a good fit for that. And so then, you know, I got really, you know, attached and evolved with people. And for me, once I'm like deeply involved with somebody, it's then really difficult for me to pull away, because I go really, really deep and get really, really involved. And so for me, you know, what I learned and what happened with Nalasa was in the, you know, as we were getting to know each other, we just established, you know, I made it clear that, you know, one of my like principles to live up to is absolute acceptance and the willingness to have radical truth telling. Because, you know, if we, you know, desire this kind of relationship and evolutionary partnership, then that's the fundamental. What we all desire is like absolute unconditional acceptance of who we are, no matter how weird or strange our desires are. We want to have someone in our world who can hear those desires. And, you know, probably 90% of the time when you come out with this thing that you desire and you have the courage to share it with your partner, they're like, awesome, let's do that, right? And so we tend to believe that we have to like hide away the most precious parts of ourselves, and we tend to, you know, certainly for me, like I just believed that I wasn't, you know, deep down under the surface, I just believed that I wasn't worthy of having what I wanted. And then it became less about worthiness and more about like practicalities and principles. It became more about, oh, hold on, well, now I've come to this place where I know who I am and I know that I'm whole, then it becomes about, well, what is it about like the kind of strategy and the way that I'm going about this that just isn't working? And what are the things then that one can make some, reality checks along the way to ensure this person that I'm looking for this kind of love with has the consciousness required, has the ability to tell the truth, has the ability and capacity to go to places that are deeply uncomfortable, is willing to be courageous enough to tell me the things that I don't want to hear, time and time again, and go to like the next place and the next level of love and pull back, all of the curtains to the next place and do that in a way that feels safe and respects where your and our and the relationships like boundaries and like level is at right now, to have that to be enough so that there's always something more to unravel.
Okay, so a lot of people are going to feel like this is elusive. So what was it that you had to change? Where you said like, I have to change my strategy so I can like attract this person in. So what were the things personally that you needed to recognize or shift or process and work with?
To recognize and shift and process and work with. So that's a different question, but I'm happy to answer that. So I basically designed a transformational coaching program called Fresh Mind that went through systematically 18 areas of intelligence, including the romantic, and went through different stages of consciousness and feeling as to where in my life up to this point I hadn't met my needs for like survival, for being met emotionally, for power and status, for having a clear sense of identity, and where in my being and my system I was holding on to feelings of shame or guilt or places where I withdraw. And so, with the person that I created this with, I basically did, a year of deep introspective work and looking at like where
can you share
stuff?
Yeah. So are you able to share any little bits and pieces of that? Like I know that you probably like process so many things, but it's just to speak to the people who might find themselves in these positions and have these thoughts and no one to share it with. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, that's how I feel. And actually, yeah, I can move through this like Anthony has. So you talked about shame and guilt. Like, are you able to or willing to share any, like a little glimpse of maybe what sort of shame stuff you had to process or guilt?
So I inherited a feeling essentially around maleness because, I don't know if you've noticed in our society at the moment that maleness seems to be something of an issue and masculinity is not necessarily a good thing. And in growing up mostly without a father and being like present to, I had a pattern in my life of being present to and with a lot of women who were carrying a lot of trauma, who I would then touch into that trauma and I would be the person like responsible for that. And I always became like the bad guy and I was willing to like take that on. Shame basically said to me like, yeah, it's all my fault. And so the way through that was just being willing to be present with it and feel it all, and then allow myself to separate the feeling from the identity, and realize that this was just like a belief that I was holding about, a societal conditioned belief that I'd inherited about what men were like in the world, and then to create a sense of separation from that, and then actually feeling into shame is a powerful energy. Once you start transforming it, it adds like so much like life and power. So does that give you something of an idea?
Yeah, I mean, just like yeah. So you're touching on the fact that you didn't have your father in your life as much.
Yeah, like it didn't occur to me, what occurred to me now and what I've been able to do, it didn't occur to me that in not having those examples and taking on the ideas about what men were from modern day society, which is generally not that great.
What was your view of men then?
What was my view of men?
At the time?
At the time, just violent. Basically, like, if you look at all the evils of the world, the men are responsible for them all, and I am one. So essentially, like, everything bad in the world is my fault because I have a penis, basically, and then and I should therefore diminish all of my maleness because that is utterly wrong. When in fact, what I came to realize over the last decade is it's not masculinity is not the problem, is we suffer from a lack of masculinity. It's not that masculinity is a problem. There's actually nothing toxic about masculinity. If it's toxic, you can, now come a phrase, if it's toxic, it's not masculinity.
So you felt, if I summarize it, like, did you feel ashamed to be a man and feel guilty? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So then you worked through all of those processes, but you just said, I then had to like change my strategy if I was to like attract someone into my life, like Nalasa. So what was the strategy that you had to change? Was it your thought processes, the energy that you were putting out?
Oh, so it's just basically being clear about what I was looking for and how to check in with that, and how. So I spoke before about how, once I really deeply connect with someone, like, I'm in. That I fully commit energetically, and so there's just then like the testing those boundaries. So previously, like, I just go all in on not knowing someone that well, and then sort of try and figure it out from there. And so basically it was like checking, essentially asking this question, like, can I break this? And at one point I turned around to Nalasa and I was like, this is what I'm thinking. I go around with this thing and be like, well, will this break? Does this stand up to like, to if you build a structure and you create a structure, for example, I know people who create like kind of yurts and geodomes and that kind of thing. And whenever they finished one, they'll swing on it to make sure that it, the structure has integrity. So I was like, okay, I was like, can I break it? And Nalasa turned around, I was like, oh, you want me to break it? I was like, no. So it was a question of like, is there an undeniable spark of erotic polarity here? Is Nalasa and is the partnership between us capable of handling and navigating conflict intelligently? Is there a clear possibility of a shared vision and purpose and actually creating a like partnership together in the way that I've like envisioned for years was possible? It's essentially when people have these ideas for relationships of kind of ticking a box of how like tall somebody is or how much money somebody makes. And but my tick boxes were around these like principles and ways of being, and testing out whether these these things existed, where I might, how can I test and check that this is actually real and tangible and true, rather than just a projection or a delusion on my part.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Nalasa, what about your history, that relationship that you shared about earlier? Can you take us through, again, what was going through your mind at that time and how you were able to move and process through that?
Let's see.
And I guess you may have, or it was just written down before, like talking about abandonment. Like, what sort of sense of abandonment did you have to work through? How did that present for you?
Yeah. So I was with my fiance, my ex, who were living in California, and we were together for 3.5, 4 years. And he had 2 kids, nice house. There was a ton of security and homeliness there. And there was parts of our relationship that, like, I wanted kids. He didn't really want more kids. There was a couple little things that you could say that I was settling for, but the love that I felt in the relationship, and what I really realized after, is the security that also happened from that. It felt big for me to claim both a home and this whole little, he had 2 boys and himself as like my family. And so all of that felt like a really deep processing for me to claim, even at the beginning or in the middle of our relationship. I've traveled a lot throughout my life. And so having an actual home base and this like sense of security was really, really big for me. And at the same time, it also kind of felt like it was almost like trying on or taking on someone else's life. Like there was so many things that were his that weren't really mine. And so I do think I lost myself a little bit in the relationship, which didn't really come out till the end. And there's like a whole bunch of drama as far as like how we ended up breaking up. We ended up getting engaged. And then like within the week, I found out he went on a business trip and all of these different things came up. And essentially I was very, very upset and realized that I couldn't go on, but I also felt like I couldn't leave because it just felt like his whole life was my life. Like I didn't see myself having a life outside of this because of all this time and energy, et cetera, that I've put on that. And pretty much it brought up deep abandonment issues for me, of deciding to leave and even feeling like he ended up being with another woman for 3 nights on a business trip. And I knew about it at the time and was furious. And he was lying to me about it because he knew I wouldn't like it and was trying to people please me. And it was a really strange scenario that all happened very quick. And it was it was too much emotion, too much sensation in my body for me to handle and deal with. And I was trying to communicate that I literally just can't deal with the amount of emotion that he's triggering in me. And it was really hard because he was on the other side of the country. And the night, there was this one night, and it was in California. So there was Santa Ana winds, where there was these super hot, super gusty, loud winds, and there's no air conditioning. It was just so uncomfortable, as well as all this emotional turmoil, all pounding on itself at the same time, and sleepless nights. And we ended up taking a break. We ended up taking what was going to be a 3-month break for me to deal with all of this. And what really ended up coming up was these deep emotional abandonment issues of him. But then in my mind, I was in a car accident when I was 1.5 and separated from my mom for 3 months. As she was hospitalized from the car accident. And so like I stopped breastfeeding and was like separated from her then. And then there was another thing that happened when I was 6, when she was also absent for 3 months. And so this idea of like sense of security, or what I'm almost like tying my life to, was just him leaving, or just the process of the how much emotional weight and dependency I had put on him felt very, very in sync with all of my emotional kind of abandonment trauma, or idea of abandonment. I was actually abandoned at times when I was young. And so it just brought up this flood of emotions. And there was times that, like, there was one night that I was just like screaming, and I had a friend who was really good and just like talking with me on the phone, just being like allowed just to process and go, and kind of coaching me through it, which was amazing. And even in my mind, there weren't any times where it was like I could almost change his name with my mom's name, and it was just, the whole feeling was exactly the same. It, like, the person didn't matter. Like, it was my experience, like my internal processing and unloading. And it's funny thinking about it now. It makes me like laugh, because it was just so intense and incredible. And even just allowing yourself to experience this much hurt and pain, and knowing that you're just going through it, as opposed to allowing it to stop or thinking. And it felt like just the amount of trauma or things I processed like within this like month and a half period, which essentially was the separation of him, and leading up to the time right before I met Anthony. I felt like I had like lost this like weight, like so much weight of knowing that like this, like understanding this abandonment process more, or like the mind needing for it to like understand it, and like also like physically just like allowing that emotion to be like released from my cells and my body.
Yeah, it's interesting how coming back to your mother and the actual abandonment that happened that was potentially unavoidable, but how it can then play out in numerous relationships, because and it can even be friendships as well, can't it? Because a lot of people think, okay, well, I've had this relationship and it might be toxic in a way, but how can I take responsibility for this? And how can I look within as to why I've attracted this? And most people would only look at historical, intimate relationships and not think that their family or their parents have got anything to do with it. So, yeah, I love that you pulled that thread through.
Yeah, it was big. It was really big. And the biggest thing is just allowing all the emotions to feel, and realizing that it's changing your own internal story, or like coming to understand, and talking about your process that you do a little bit. I ended up having conversations between like my younger self and like my adult self, for like who I'm wanting to become, and really offering support and digesting of information, and getting more coherency between like my own like younger self that I'm like here and old, like able to take care of. Like, I don't need an outside person. And the biggest thing that allowed me to end up leaving my ex was really just figuring out that for me to love, it's like loving myself more than like loving someone else. Like the idea of self-love, and really choosing that in its entirely. I know that having the choice of like leaving any partnership that isn't working is like a really, really difficult choice for anyone to make. And it's amazing how much it feels like a death. And I think it's so much easier when you're focusing on essentially choosing life. Like, it's not necessarily like being afraid to die from like that, but like realizing you're choosing a more fullness life of yourself.
Can you talk a little bit about this whole concept of love yourself more than you love anyone else? Because again, I think a lot of people like have difficulty getting their head around that concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We kind of joke around a thing where it's like there's people that say that love and relationships is all about compromise, and we kind of make a joke that like you're never compromise. And for that, it's like, you know, stating what you want when you want it, not to say that you can't necessarily change, but like owning what you're needing. And it was interesting I mean, the period of emotional turmoil I was in when I was like, no, like I love myself more to leave this relationship, was just really kind of like a surrendering. It was like, it doesn't matter how much I love him, or like wanting to like not put myself down necessarily, but like allowing myself to bend for this other person's desires is just killing myself. Like it's not allowing me to remain full for like my love. And let me think. And so it was just like, it became so clear to me in this like moment about being like, for me to be able to live at all is needing to put myself first and not like surrendering in these ways to this, to another person's needs or will. And like, for me to love just the amount of power that's there from like owning your own divinity or your own essence without needing to surrender or allowing for compromises in ways that actually hurt you, but you allow yourself to do it, or allow yourself to have those things happen because it's almost for like the betterment of another. Ultimately just sacrifices yourself and doesn't get you to where you're needing to go.
Yeah, sure.
Or where you want to go, or like where you're desiring to go. Like, just the appreciation of fullness in every capacity allows for more fullness.
So you did kind of talk about this earlier on, Anthony, when you were introducing yourself, and either of you can chime in, but yes, what is an evolutionary partnership, again, in summary?
An evolutionary partnership is a partnership where you are choosing to be together to grow the love that you have, and use your like relationship and partnership and your love to innovate together and essentially to grow your legacy in the world. So essentially, I believe that there are many couples either who are already together, who are evolving into, who are like successful. They've created a lot in the world already. They're playing a really big game, and they know that there's more, and that more can be found through really tuning into their partner and using the love in the relationship to grow their legacy. So if you think about, as we've spoken, like, part of self-love is being able to ask for and receive absolute acceptance of who you are, and being able to share all of your desires and tell the truth. Well, if that happens, then there tends to be all of this fear, self-doubt, worthiness, shame, guilt that gets transformed and alchemized into a new expression. We don't have to waste time in our relationships thinking about what will my partner think about this, because it's courageously all out in front on the table. And then you can really step into a place of expansion and see, like, really what is our vision for this life, of what we are here to do, as both as individuals and also together as partners. whether that's to like create a foundation together or be together in a business initiative or in whatever other way, like not only serves the growth of the couple, but also serves the evolution and growth of humanity in, the most enjoyable and impactful way possible.
Okay, so are you talking about evolutionary partnership is not just your intimate relationships, it's also all of your other relationships? It can be business as well.
So I mean, primarily our focus is on couples who are partnering together in life and business to create impact. And an evolutionary partnership can be like any partnership where you are coming together to create impact, though primarily focused upon, romantic sexual union.
So can you talk a little bit about when the partnership needs to go a separate way? Because sometimes part of the evolution is that you need to take your separate paths as well. Can you speak a bit about that? Or do you not believe in that aspect?
So I think one of the things that we do with couples too is really looking at like, what is their vision? Where are they wanting to go? How are you doing that? And so in creating a solid foundation and structure, and really looking at compatibility from like, are you agreeing to be honest, be open? Are we all both wanting to get to the same place? And if that is the case, then like that level of commitment, like I agree that like a lot of partners aren't necessarily there and that open. And there's ways that I guess things can seem like it, but partly I think in both of our previous relationships, there's almost like compensating tendencies that are controlling the relationship to make us want to stay and feel safe and feel secure, or like projections of that. So if you aren't functioning from this almost like inner child place of like needing to feel taken care of, like what can you create from that level of love? From like, if love and openness and clarity is the foundation, like what gets invented, created from this place of expansion, from this place of evolutionary partnership. And so in the people that we work with, we're really looking for people that have done a good amount of this work, that feel solid in the relationship and are wanting what is next, like how can we make the impact, really give our love that we share between us even more brightness to the world in some tangible physical way that helps produce greater harmony.
Mm-hmm. So not necessarily people who are going out there trying to look for this partnership. They're already in a partnership.
Yeah, that's our wheelhouse of who we're working with. Like we do things where we're speaking to some of the things that it takes in order to create that we have that like experience. But if a couple comes to us and their evolution is obviously by choosing different individual paths and moving on from that particular relationship, they're not good fit for what we offer. There's a lot of amazing work in the world already around conscious decoupling and what people can do. But if you're asking me to give some sort of like insight or guidance around that, it's really simple, which is, be honest with yourself and the partner and be courageous to, look at what you're personally desiring and be courageous enough to choose that over the relationship, because ultimately that's the highest choice for everyone anyway. You might be, I think, for people staying in relationships beyond their sell by date, that's because, we want to put off, there's often a, immediate kind of pain of leaving that one has to go through. And people want to put that off. So we extend our pain and suffering like over time, rather than, kind of do it head first, run into the brick wall, deal with the injuries and then like move on. And then also, I think the greatest thing once you've gone through that is being able to see that you can learn from pleasure rather than from your pain and suffering. You can choose to put yourself into a context where you make an agreement with yourself to learn from pleasure and enjoyment and connection, not from pain and suffering and making choices out of survival.
Yeah, sure. So what do you think what are your beliefs that you would love to share with people? And I guess this would be around the conditioning that people believe around their relationships that potentially harms them and doesn't allow them that ability to grow and evolve.
I'm not sure if this answers your question exactly, but in thinking, so my relationship right now with my ex is actually really, really good. We have almost a better relationship now than when we were together in some ways. And in my body was fighting experiencing this pain. It was almost like the amount of pain that he caused me or that I caused myself through this relationship, like the amount of attachment I formed and then essentially had to sever. Like I wouldn't sign up for that again or, but to be able to be put in such a situation that actually allowed me to alchemize and transmit all of this like deep emotional work that I was holding since I was a child was like the most miraculous gift. And so often in relationships, we tend to want to stay with what is safe and what is easy and what is known and what is comfortable, even if that is being safe with what is uncomfortable to a certain degree. And that, like I had to essentially like let my identity and myself die to some degree of like this whole world, this whole relationship that I came up with. And I think one of the first times we first got together, I gave this idea of like, if this was the whole world I came up with like, it was thinking of you create your own world. So if I created this snow globe of like this life and this world that I love and it shattered, then I can also create another snow globe. And I ended up making a joke about like this time it will have like pink sparkles in it or something. For, well, if this is the world I created and I desired, and I realized that wasn't what I wanted, what is the world that I do want to create? What is the world that I do desire? And how do you then make that happen? Not from being scared of getting hurt, but like from love and from enjoyment and from pleasure and for looking at the magic that is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That does answer my question. And it's that whole thing of like thinking that you've got to stay in discomfort and not really kind of just trusting and knowing that there is something better that's out there for you if you allow yourself to desire and break free and give yourself that space.
Yeah. And even like people are afraid, even in cleaning house and stuff, afraid of getting rid of things sometimes and will hold on to it. But like the amount you're sacrificing for holding on to something that is actually taking up space in your environment, like once you allow yourself to like mentally unhook from that, the amount of spaciousness and openness you can feel after that, like you don't actually know how that will feel until after it's actually gone from your environment. Whether that's a relationship or a physical item in your living space or anything, but, and like allowing that surrender is just absolutely amazing and exquisite and even the process of me feeling like I'm going crazy, as much as it's painful in the time, like really holding on to the thread, like everyone's consciousness knows somewhere that like there is another thing outside of this that is going to be more expansive or going to be something. And really, even in all of the pain, having that thread present of what you're actually going for and what you're wanting to both like create and like what your heart is knows more deeply than anything else, that is like longing to blossom, that helps you go through that pain, is I think the most important thread to keep in mind if you're experiencing any of this turmoil right now as well.
Yeah, well said. Oh, is there anything else that either of you want to share about this topic?
Yeah, I can give a couple of premises in terms of what we say exists in the world or what is possible, which is the frequency of one true love like exists in everyone's field and world who desires it. And then there are like a number of like potential one true loves. It's a frequency and a way of being, not necessarily like only one specific person out of 8 billion that exists. And so in choosing to first of all, it's like choosing to accept that's a possibility. And that's a premise that you can find is what can ultimately lead to finding that within the relationship that you're in, or finding that relationship that can express it. You know, there's a great story about this woman who was in this horrible relationship with her husband, and then she found this new love and created this amazing partnership with the same man. Because, you know, some of the time it's the thoughts that we have about the person that we live that is creating the idea of lack of love, not necessarily the actual person. And sometimes it's the person that we're with isn't the best fit for us, and it's really useful to be able to discern between the two. I think the other premise is that this frequency and this way of being in like exquisite connection, where we can be fully met, where we can be absolutely unconditionally accepted, and we can, you know, tell the truth and state all of our desires and have them heard and seen, if not, realized fully. I think it's worth being aware that, again, this is a very kind of like it's like a child that's being born into the world. We've lived in a context where for hundreds of thousands of years, many relationships, the majority of the relationships have been around survival, have been around the need to, produce 5, 8 children in order so that one of them or two of them might live long enough to be able to support you when you get old. And I think it's easy to, in this world, because we're living in a world of abundance where we have so much material available to us, particularly in the Western world, we haven't yet become used in our system to be able to handle that. And so that frequency and this energy and this way of being is available for all of us. And it usually just takes like some shifts in perspective and maybe some emotional, a little bit of emotional clearing, and in order to kind of realize this possibility. But once you realize this possibility, there's this kind of beauty for creating potential and creating whatever your impossible dreams and missions are in the world, and doing that with someone like at your side and in your corner who you absolutely and truly love. And that's a wonderful thing to choose to create.
Amazing. Do you have anything to add to that, Nalasa?
You mentioned something a little bit before, and about like working only with couples, and partly is like you can get really clear on what you desire and what you love on yourself. Like you don't need a person, but essentially in like calling in that relationship, calling in the type of love you'd like, and really not being not being deceived and like projecting that onto other people, but like being in the frequency in that like level or standard that you are wanting to exist and play in. And so tuning in with this frequency and this way of being, I really think is for anyone. It's not necessarily only if you already have that love. Like we both had to get to a certain point about being clear with what we wanted and what our love, life, and existence would look like before we even met. And so, yeah, I just wanted to offer that it's tuning in with like that frequency in any individual before you even find that partner, because it's a matter of like playing there. And then once you get like that, growing even more from there as it can go deeper. But
yeah. Oh no, I like that, because then otherwise that is when people cross paths with someone and then they're like, oh, can I fit? Can I compromise with this? And, is this good enough? Rather than, is this what I really want? But can you just, I guess this is of like really imagining on an energetic level as well, like who would you be when you're in that partnership? And then you can attract it. Is that what you mean? Or what would your tips be for someone to align to the frequency?
So to align to that frequency, my suggestion would be to create that vision of what that expression of this partnership would look like for you, what you would want to, like what are the things you really care about, and what is like actually possible for you to create. And a combination of that is your ideal or your evolutionary partnership. And then you can come up with a phrase that represents this frequency. So, when I work with individuals who part of their vision, they're like, well, I want to change the world, I want to create this impact, I want to raise the GDP of entire nations, I want to like completely change the face of the television industry. Okay, great. And then they're always, if they're not in a partnership, there's always like the thing that they want for themselves that they often they have to go really deep in order to kind of admit and accept and allow themselves, right? So then you get to like make up a phrase for yourself that encapsulates that frequency or that potential, this potential that exists right now in this very moment. You can access this partnership. And then, yes, there's this element of like, who do you want to be and what like the habits and behaviors and that kind of thing. And it's really coming down to where your choices that you make and asking yourself, is this aligned with this frequency? When going back to when I met Nalasa, like I had a world of noise in my head telling me not to go to that event. And I had a world of noise in my head when I met Nalasa saying, like, do not have anything to do. There was like a voice in my head that said, do not have anything to do with this woman. Right. And then But if I don't listen to that frequency, like, we wouldn't be here. So it's less, sometimes it's less to do with like the doing and more to do with your ability and training yourself to tune into and align with the frequency and feel that and listen to what your heart and body is saying, not what the noisy mind is trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Listen to the heart as well.
Yeah.
Over the mind. So if people want to dive a little bit deeper into this, how is it they can explore your work? How can they find you?
Our website is lovesnextlevel.com. So they can reach out to us. They can look at more of our stuff there and reach out to us. We also have an Instagram if they want to follow us at Loves Next Level. And yeah, those are the main two things.
Great. Oh, thanks so much for your time, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. So.
Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. If you're interested in working with me, I offer online courses for the general public and trainings for practitioners, therapists, and coaches. I also open limited one-to-one coaching spaces throughout the year. If you would like to find out more, head to my website, drjinong.com.